Welcome tonight to our TMBT Media podcast. Tonight, to celebrate Black History Month, we're here with one of my mentors. Today is February 28th, 2022, and I'm honored tonight to have one of my mentors and one of my family members, Clarence McGill. Clarence, are you there with us, my brother?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me, Milt.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to have you. And once again, I'm honored. Of course, those that know me well know who you are as part of my family and what you've meant to me as a person. And so it means a great deal for us to have you back. I think this is our third year running, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And so I'm honored. We're blessed to have you with us tonight. I promise not to keep you as long as we did the past 2 years, but really hoping you, as usual, change some minds and touch some hearts with your words tonight. We want to get you to just go back for those people that didn't have a chance to hear your previous two podcasts, if you will. Just go back and tell those that don't know the Clarence McGill story and how it all started.
Okay, well, again, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to share my story and, allowing some information to be disseminated, amongst your audience. As you mentioned, my name is Clarence McGill. My nickname is Bucky, so that was my childhood nickname. And I grew up in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York, and received a high school diploma from a Binghamton High School, and I was, pretty good athlete, pretty good student, and I had, a good social life. And in that regards, my athletic ability, allowed me to be pursued by different colleges and universities to play football. So I made a decision amongst some different schools to attend Syracuse University to play college football and received a full grant aid at that time in the late 60s. Matter of fact, 1967 was my freshman year. During that time, anybody that knows a little bit of history about America, the late 60s, they were really a tumultuous time for the United States because it was a transition of historic proportions that was occurring at that time. You can think about the late 60s, you think about the civil rights movement, civil disobedience, we talk about Kent State, Vietnam War, Woodstock, Martin Luther King movement, and he was killed, and Malcolm X was killed, and John and Bob Kennedy, Muhammad Ali. So there was just a preponderance of names in that era that were everlasting and ever present at that time. So no matter who you were, black, white, green, you were impacted by the daily occurrences that were happening at that time. You could not avoid it. You were either involved, you had a family in the Vietnam War, you had kids that were in college that were being impacted by, the movement of the time, which was, love and Woodstock and all that kind of fervor. So during those political and cultural changes, I was in school at Syracuse University with 9 other African-American individuals, and that was the highest number of individual African-American individuals that were recruited and did enter the university at 1 year, and that was 1967. So the head coach at Syracuse University during my freshman year and during the time I was at Syracuse, his name was Ben Swartzwalter, and Ben Swartzwalter coached not only myself, but he coached many super college football players, not limited to Jim Brown, Larry Zonka, Ernie Davis, who was the first African American Heisman Trophy winner. We can go on and on. Jim Nance, who played for New England or the Boston Patriots. Floyd Little, who recently passed. So anyway, there is a long list of names that were highly exposed and highly skilled that played for Ben Schwartzwalder at Syracuse University. So when I was recruited, I was recruited at a time that every NCAA football program had a freshman team and a freshman organization. You couldn't go to school and enter school in the late 60s, in the early 70s, and play on the varsity football team or basketball team or baseball team. You had to play in the freshman category your first year. So that was mandatory. Then your second year, you could play varsity football. So in my particular career, I was pretty decent, and I started at the left defensive end for Syracuse University as a junior. So in those days, when you had a freshman team, if you started as a junior, it was equivalent to starting as a freshman if you didn't have a freshman unit. So if you can make those comparisons.
Right.
But in the spring of 1970, we had some racial tensions. And I'm giving you all this backdrop to let you know that I'm going to discuss a book called The Syracuse Eight, or Leveling the Playing Field, the story of the Syracuse Eight, which actually regurgitates some of the things I'm talking about, and also has a end that is very interesting in regards to my disobedience and our disobedience in receiving the Syracuse University Medal of Extraordinary Courage from the Chancellor at a later date. So I'm building up to that. But
okay.
In the spring of 1970, and I was sophomore, junior, racial tensions came to a boiling point at Syracuse University because I and the others were dealing with some real racial attacks that I felt were uncalled for. You have to realize that my coach, Ben Schwartzwalder, was the 1959 NCAA football coach that was a national champion. Syracuse University won the national championship in 1959. So I was sort of, always amazed that the program was that good, but I was also appalled that when I was there in the late 70s, I had to confront a lot of racial situations that I felt were unnecessary. Those being, I was told by my defensive end coach that, not to go out with white women and, make sure that my social experiences are limited, to, certain type of women.
Right.
I was, that coach was also my academic counselor. So I had to go to him to set up my curriculum for school, and he tried to compel me to sign up for courses that wouldn't allow me to matriculate. Mm-hmm. So he would compel me to sign up, or suggest. He didn't really compel. He suggested and advised that I sign up for ridiculous courses whatever, basket weaving or tennis or whatever. And they advised all the black athletes to do that, and some white athletes. And, we were pretty good students. And one particular athlete, Al Newton, he was an officer in the National Honor Roll Society, a national office. And they tried the same thing with him. But I sort of worked around that because I suggested to all my teammates that were under that attack to fill out your cards, your courses in pencil, and have your coach sign it, who was your academic counselor. Then when he signed the card, you erase everything and put it in pencil and put it in pen what you wanted to take. So, fortunately, that little process, that little sneaky process, allowed me to graduate with honors and, allowed some of us, we have an attorney, we have a PhD from the University of Wisconsin. And so, we sort of circumvented that in our own little way. But the fact of the matter is that we were also dealing with, not only the academic advising problem, we were dealing with unfair medical treatment for black players. We had a doctor who was running the athletic department, Dr. Pilo, who was a gynecologist. He wasn't a doctor. He didn't know anything about athletics, and he was heard to say, quote, he hated touching black people. But he was good friends with Ben Swartzwater, and they were golf buddies, and that's how he got the job in terms of being the team doctor and the team, heading the medical staff, which was really kind of insane. Matter of fact, one of the white players who went on to play for the Buffalo Bills wouldn't allow our doctor to even see him because he knew also that he was a charlatan from the doctor's perspective. We also besides the medical piece, besides the academic advising piece, we had issues with how we were chosen to play on Saturday afternoon during the games because there were unwritten rules, and a lot of older white coaches know this, that you couldn't have over two blacks on the field, either on offense and defense. If you played down south, Alabama, Georgia, a black player couldn't score because it might be a riot. So those types of things we addressed, and we wanted some fair treatment of assignment based on athletic performance, versus race. And the fourth, last but not least, we wanted a black coach on staff. Syracuse University never had anybody black in their athletic department ever since 1898. So we wanted to integrate the staff and have, somebody that would be supportive in terms of our needs from a cultural perspective. So that's what we did in the spring ball. We stopped playing in 1970. We stopped playing. We wanted some of these demands met or at least addressed. Ben Swartzwater allowed the white players to sort of have some acceptance to our demands, and they had Ben Swartzwater had 65 of the white players sign petitions that they didn't want to play with us. They refused to listen to what we were saying. So we really had an impasse at one point, which was, heavily documented in the New York area. So right. Jim Brown, who was an alumni and played, as I said, he played with the same coach I played with. He heard about it, and he came he retired from the NFL and was involved with Hollywood at that time. But he took the time to come and try to mediate the situation between his old coach, who was our coach, and the white players and the administration in general. When he got there, there were two commissions looking at the whole situation. The New York State Human Rights Commission had an official investigation, and the chancellor, who was named Chancellor Corbally, he had an official investigation with, a certain number of faculty that he put together. So those two commissions were ongoing, and during that time, the two commissions reported that Syracuse University and the athletic department was racist in some of its capacity, and that Syracuse University should address it. Well, of course, nothing was done, and in retrospect, the Chancellor Corbally was fired, or because the football coach was stronger than the Chancellor, and you know of situations like that that go on even today.
Right.
So that's what happened many years ago. So I left, and Jim Brown, was very instrumental, because before he left during that time, we hung out with Jim Brown for about a week, Jim Brown and his buddy. And during that boycott, the last night, Jim Brown said, well, I'm getting ready to leave. And when I come back here tomorrow, I want you all to tell me what you've decided. Because Jim Brown said you're not going to be seen or welcomed in the NFL. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. There was a lot of venomous literature and correspondence sent to us. We were threatened, death threatened, of course, and all that through different people upstate New York. But Brown said, okay, I'm leaving tomorrow, so you guys are going to have one last night to decide what you want to do in regards to this boycott that you're involved with. And that night we cried and fought and stayed up all night and discussed, scenarios. And when he came in the morning, we said, hey, we're going to follow through with this, because we don't want this to happen to anybody else coming here at Syracuse University. So, to make a long story short, we continued our demonstration. Now, fortunately, there were some people, some faculty and people on staff at Syracuse University that made sure that our grant and aid stayed solid. In other words, the money to pay our education was still going to be valid. And that was a tough fight, but that's what happened. The university, made good that we could finish our education at Syracuse University, and Syracuse would pay the bill. So when I left Syracuse in 71, 72, I tried to play NFL football. We got some trials, but every time we went somewhere or I went somewhere, they talk about Syracuse, with the New England Patriots, Weeb Eubank, who was the coach of the New York Jets at that time. So, and years later, I talked to Coach McPherson at Syracuse, who was the Syracuse University head coach. Nice guy. And we were eating dinner, and he said, because I think he was coaching for Denver during the boycott during my time. And he said, basically, you were not going to play NFL football because all the teams knew what was going on, and Ben Sportswater made sure that all the teams knew not to accept us. Mm. So, and that was kind of, I knew that was the situation, but it was heavy coming from Coach McPherson years later, that he said, I was there, so I knew over there. And McPherson was very empathetic, and he was a good guy. And just a sidebar, when those one of the 65 white players that signed a petition against us, refusing to accept us to return, was a gentleman named Joe Ehrman, who went on and played ball for the Baltimore Colts. And you look up some of his stuff if you want to Google it. He's pretty popular in terms of coaching style, literature that he's written. And he said many times that he wanted to reconcile with us because he was wrong in terms of really leading the charge, being the protagonist for the white players, because he was the captain and leading that charge against us. And he fessed up in how Ben Schwartzwalder, facilitated things to him, et cetera, et cetera. So, but anyway, that's so when all that ended, I left Syracuse University, never to return. I didn't want to see Syracuse again in life. And in 2006, 36 years after I left Syracuse, I got a call from Nancy Cantor, Nancy was the chancellor at that time. She's chancellor, I believe, at Rutgers right now. But she was chancellor of Syracuse University. And she called and said she wanted me to come back, and she wanted all the players to come back, the African-American players that were involved in the boycott. And because she wanted to officially apologize on behalf of the university and give us the Chancellor's Medal of Courage. What transpired before that time, 2006, Syracuse University has a publishing house, and a lot of books were published out of Syracuse. If you had a history book way back when, before all the computer stuff came up, but if you had a history book or if you had school books, they were all printed by the Syracuse University Publishing House. If you would notice that all the early books.
Okay.
So, and one of the gentlemen that was working for the Syracuse Publishing House was David Mark, top of the line man. He passed away a couple years ago. Brilliant guy, and he worked for the Syracuse Publishing House. And Nancy Cantor asked David to look into the Syracuse 8 thing and write a book, because she wanted not only to apologize, she wanted everything to be out in the open, what actually transpired at that time. Now, Syracuse University has a very good conniving way of keeping history down. It's hard to get information anywhere from the Underground Railroad to the Syracuse 8. They try to diffuse and hide facts and truth. So, anyways, David Mark did his work, and Syracuse University, be mindful, Syracuse was created to educate all people in 1870, to educate black folks, Native Americans, women. In the first class, those particular folks graduated at Syracuse University. That's the way the university was set up. Now, later on down the road, it got knocked off the track, and I think we tried to put it back on the track with the Syracuse 8 members. But nevertheless, David, also Syracuse University, always copied everything. You didn't have copiers, the machines, the Xerox copiers and all different types of copiers. But Syracuse staff and faculty were required to copy things. So you always had 2 copies, and the copies went into the archives. Syracuse University has a big archives of information that date back to the late 1800s. So the chancellor, and no one has access to the archives, free access, and so Chancellor Nancy Cantor allowed David Mark to have access to the archives to get information about the history of racial athletic behaviors at Syracuse. And that's part of the book. The book goes back way back to the 1800s to clarify, describe, break down, explain the history of athletics, black athletes being involved in athletics, and how the university has developed its character in regards to activism. Because there were many, many, many players that had activism, civil disobedience and activism at Syracuse University in upstate New York in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, in the mid 1900s. And the book captures that. And David told me one time that I would eat dinner with him every once in a while. And when I was in Syracuse, and David said he would go into that archives because he had the key, and he would come out crying like a baby because he just couldn't believe the type of stuff he saw and the type of stuff he read. Right. And so that was real moving.
Now, paint me a picture, if you don't mind. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want you to paint our listeners a picture of the state of New York in 1968, as far as racial tension, as far as you guys asking for things that weren't given. It sounds like you guys put quite a bit on the line to ask for what should have been normal. Take our listeners back to that time, if you could. I'm just talking about the tension and the on-campus life and the students, and just take our listeners back, if you will.
Well, at that time, it was the late 60s, so you had, first of all, you had Vietnam, so everybody had to, all the boys had to sign up for the draft. I think my number was 149, so they picked numbers out of the hat, if you will. And those who had numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, if they got chosen, they disappeared from campus. They went into the military to fight in the Vietnam War. Right. You had the Martin Luther King and Malcolm X movement, in which there were many demonstrations in the city and on campus. And at that time, the university campus was really partnered with the city, with city government and the city population. We were very close to folks that lived in Syracuse, along with the folks the co-eds and the kids that were on campus going to school. So at that time, there was a real partnership between the university and the community. Right. That seems to be a little different now because they have the university say, "Don't go down there, don't go with them because they're dangerous." Right. But you're actually talking about your own family members because once we got involved with the community heavily, 2 of our members married women in the community, and we was just it was just a good place to be. Right. If you weren't in your home. Right. But anyway, and you had again Kent State was going on, so there was, and Woodstock, so there was a lot of college disobedience going on in general. You had marijuana happening, which was pretty popular in those communities, in those college communities. But it was just a full-blown time of political and cultural change in our country. Right. Right. So that's what was happening at that time for those that may be too young. But hopefully I gave you some insight.
Well, what we do here is we'll have, and I want to also give you your flowers. You are an author as well as those of us that have listened before and that know you. The name of your book is the Syracuse 8, Leveling the Playing Field. The story of the Syracuse 8. Clarence McGill is also an author. For those of our listeners that have a chance, if you can pull up so much information on him on Wikipedia, online while you listen to his words. So it's that's the beautiful thing about technology, is that people can actually find out who you are while they're listening to you. And here on your Wikipedia page, it gives great detail about 1969 and the things that were going on. This book is written by David Mark, M-A-R-C, and it's called Leveling the Playing Field. For those just tuning in, we're with one of my mentors, one of my family members, Clarence McGill, Syracuse University. Clarence McGill also has his master's in 1975 from Howard University, the prestigious Howard University, Washington, D.C. Also an author. Clarence McGill, continue, please. I just want to put out and have people kind of do as I'm doing, going back to your book and looking through your book while I talk to you. It really gives context to what you're saying, to your words. So please continue talking about those times during your college career as an 18-year-old young man trying to find his way in the world. Please continue.
And that's interesting you said, because we were 17, 18, 19 years old.
Exactly.
And we're making adult decisions that would impact our lives forever, and it has impacted.
Correct.
Our lives.
Of course, yes.
But people, we went through our civil disobedience and our demonstrations, but there were about, according to David Mark, and his research, there were about 150 college and university civil disobedience demonstrations that went on during the late 60s. And if you want to look those up, University of Washington, black player was accused by the head coach accused the head coach of discrimination. University of Texas at El Paso, long jump champion Bob Beeman was kicked off the team for protesting Mormons' treatment of blacks. In Princeton, the players accused the coach of racism. University of Wyoming, the Wyoming 14. I almost went to Wyoming, and and you might have seen some of the program about the University of Wyoming getting kicked off, but that was Lloyd Eaton, who was the head coach. Indiana University, they dismissed 14 football players for responding to racial actions at the school. Buffalo State, the basketball team members charged the athletic department with discrimination. University of Pittsburgh, black athletes were charged with the athletic department with discrimination. University of California, Oregon State. You can go on and on. You can go. You remember the University of Missouri recently had a big one. Right. So, and they forced the president to resign, as you well know. But anyway, the ones that I just mentioned, most of them happened during the late 60s and during my time. So, again, the whole country was very cognizant of what was going on from a racial perspective. But as I said, as time went on, Nancy Cancer called us in 2006 and to receive the citations from her and the formal apology of the university, and again, some framed citations that spoke about our accomplishments, and we received the Chancellor's Medal for Extraordinary Courage. And be mindful, other people that have that medal are Ruby Dee and Ozzie Davis and Senator Joe Biden, or President Biden. So he also has the same medal I have, that they were recognized. So, in essence, David Mark did the research, 3 years on the book, made sure everything was truthful and verified, and he Yeah, I'm a piece of the book. I wrote a piece of the book. All of us wrote our piece of the book. So the book talks about the history of Syracuse University from a racial athletic capacity from its inception in 1870 to the late 60s. And then they talk about our particular boycott and how we came to go to Syracuse University, and what were some of the important issues that we thought were that we should write about. So he gave us the opportunity, and I appreciate particularly Nancy Cantor for having the courage on behalf of Syracuse University to demonstrate to us that she felt that we were right in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our commitment, and in terms of our extraordinary contributions. And we love Syracuse University, so we go back pretty often. We bleed orange, so I don't have any malcontent for the past, because I'm getting old. I'm an old man now, but we did want to develop, document, and publish a book to make sure that at least the documentation was out there. When we pass away, at least it will be known, some of the things we went through this book, Leveling the Playing Field, the story of Syracuse 8.
That's incredible, man. And it's one of the reasons, of course, there are many reasons why I hold you in such high regards, but being able to share your story with the generations to come of how you guys were treated. And so it was mind-boggling for me reading it many years ago, because me being a country boy born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, I was under the impression, and I think many of the part of the Great Migration from the South to the North, many of our ancestors were running away from slavery. And it was under the impression that once you got to New York, you were safe. But if I'm understanding you correctly, that was not the case, just the opposite. And
no, that was not the case.
And it's mind-boggling for someone like myself. We have a documentary that's coming out. It's called The Filthy South, talking about slavery down here where I was born and raised, and the slave jail and the burial ground, African burial ground here in Richmond, Virginia. So it's something that I'm learning at 51 years old, and to hear you recant these stories, it makes me even more blessed that we are able to have the things and be able to reach the levels that we are as a culture, as a race. But it's one of those things where you hear very few stories about people from the North talking about, I take that back. You hear a lot, but for a country boy like myself, born on this side of the Mason-Dixon line, if you will, and I think a lot of people went to New York State, and some were successful and some were not. What does a parent say to you? What does your mom or your family, what do they say as far as support? Your friends, what are your friends thinking? What are they saying? Your teammates. Continue to elaborate on that time in your life, if you will.
I can. My mother was 102. She died last year, but she worked up to her 102nd birthday in Arlington, Virginia, at the Army Navy Country Club. So my mother, during that time, all she wanted was to make sure that we graduated from college. That's all she pressed, is the graduation, make sure you graduate from school. She wasn't a supporter of the boycott because she thought it would impact our education. Unfortunately, it didn't, but that was her belief and her feelings. But you have to realize, my mother went to grade school. She was born South Carolina native, but they moved up, as you mentioned, the Great Migration, and she ended up in Ithaca High School, Ithaca Middle School. I forgot the name of the middle school precisely, and the grammar school. And she has a picture of her with her sixth grade class, and they were all white in her. And I have a picture of my grammar school with all my white classmates. So Richmond, Virginia was segregated until 1970 in many areas. It still is.
Right.
So
Correct.
It's kind of interesting that in the 1900s, the 1900 and beyond, black students went to predominantly white schools and were educated in predominantly white schools.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that all racism was gone up there, because that's not the case. And if you read our book, you will see that. But in regards to education and being allowed to be educated in a general, fair capacity, a lot of black folks had that opportunity in New York and probably Massachusetts, etc. I talked to my wife, who's from Richmond, Virginia, and she came up through her education from a segregated perspective. So it's kind of strange in Virginia how they really see education in black folks.
Well, brother, it's a lot of things strange in Virginia. We're going to try to, we'll be using our documentary to touch on some of these things. And it kind of makes me feel better every time I talk to you all the time, but especially during Black History Month, to know that you and I are pretty much the same age, from the same era. And to understand that me being born in 1970, I was talking to fathers of brothers of mine, friends of mine, and they were born in 65 or 60. And I'm learning that Richmond, Virginia, just talking about where I was born, in 1965, 5 years before I was born, was a different place. 1970, Richmond, Virginia, and 1980, Richmond, Virginia, were two different things. I'm coming to find out, right? And so it seems as though African-American people had more of a voice as the time went on, because in 1960, before desegregation, we had no voice, more or less. We still had the sit-ins and the Woolworth counter things, very little voice as a people. And you go 20 years later to 1980, you go to 1988 even, when I was blessed to attend Georgetown University. Black people had made great strides, but yet and still far behind, if that makes any sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand.
Talk to our listeners a little bit about an adult Clarence McGill, who chooses to go to Howard University and continue his education, continues to travel the country, and growing up as a man. Take our listeners back to a older yet wiser Clarence McGill, 21, 22 years old, when you are doing your master's at Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Well, I was compelled to enroll at Howard University because I had a couple of years in between my undergraduate degree and the graduate enrollment to try to get into the NFL. And those couple of years were stagnated because the NFL wasn't going to let any of us in. So when I came to that realization, rather than lose my mind, which was close, I went on to graduate school at Howard University and stayed in Washington, a long time. I just did different things. I owned my own company. I was a human resource director. I was involved in, many, many things. But I met my wife in Washington, and we moved to here, Richmond. And at that time, when I moved to Richmond, I was fortunate enough to get a job with the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice, a state-run agency, and I came in as a classification and compensation supervisor. So I had to mess with the money for the agency, and then eventually I got on the institution side because they had an institution side and an administrative side. And so I went in the institution side of the Department of Juvenile Justice and started working with the young boys, young men that were incarcerated. So I did that for many years, and I actually, retired from the Department of Juvenile Justice a few years ago. But during that time, I think we made great strides in terms of what I was trying to do, and that I was trying to develop skills for our young men who are incarcerated. They were high school age, middle school age, and just gave them hopefully some background, some skills, some knowledge, some ability to pursue their life. And I think we did that pretty well in terms of some of the programs that we've developed. So that's really what happened. I had a couple boys and got 3 grandchildren, and we move on.
Right. It's incredible. And every time that I see something, I'm going to have to be honest, every time I see something about Colin Kaepernick, I think about yourself and the 7 other young men that made that sacrifice in college, because you and I know that things don't happen by happenstance. They take time. Change takes time. The slogan or the word for the Obama administration was change. And you and I know that change takes time. It took many years for us to get a black president, many years. And so with that same change, I would like to think that the Syracuse 8, including Clarence Vaughn, in 1969, 1970, set the stage for a Colin Kaepernick in the NFL. Like you said, you guys paid a hell of a price for your professional careers. And I would like to think that without Clarence McGill and his 7 other teammates, Colin Kaepernick wouldn't have a chance to say that he was mistreated for playing football. That make any sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, they have. You'll see if you Google, the Syracuse 8 and some of the things that we think we've accomplished, in over the years. They connect us with Colin Kaepernick on certain scenarios. So, you're not off with that. I don't know if Colin Kaepernick thought about us when he took a knee with the San Francisco 49ers, but you're talking about a long line of activism by black folks. I mean, when you start that, it's not only me, or it's not only the Syracuse 8, it's not only the many demonstrations that were happening at that time. You're going back to Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giants, who was very, very instrumental in fighting against Jim Crow when he beat Tommy Burns in Australia in 1908. You're talking about Jesse Owens. You're talking about Paul Robeson, who was the first black All-American football player at Rutgers. And you go back. So there's a list of people. You're talking about Jackie Robinson and how he changed the world after post-World War II by playing his debut in 1947, I believe, for the L.A. Dodgers. And Earl Lloyd, you know about Earl Lloyd, graduated from West Virginia State University.
Right.
CIAA, that he was the first African-American NBA player. And then you talk about all these guys. Marion Motley was in there.
Right.
And then you go to your boy, your homeboy, Arthur Ashe.
Right.
Arthur Ashe, he won Wimbledon, the U.S. Open.
Right. Well, it's so funny for
Australia
me.
all night.
It's so funny for me, Clarence, because the more that I do my research and you look at you take today, 2022. You look at that Georgia team that won the national championship. They were almost all African American on that team. You go back to Georgia or you go back to Alabama in 1960. I'm trying to remember on my research what year. I think USC had all of the African American players. They played Bear Bryant, killed him, and he figured out that he needed some African American boys. And the next year, the following year, he went and started recruiting African Americans, but he was not able to do that. He was not able to recruit African Americans, and he learned that from the West Coast. I think it was, and you hear them talk about it. You hear the Alabama football players talking about riding the bus through the neighborhoods and seeing seeing black people on buses playing on a team. It's different. It's something that I recommend every student athlete like myself to realize how fortunate we were in 1988 to be able to attend these universities because it's a blessing. And I don't think we take into consideration the people who paved the way for us.
That's right. And that's what I felt, because you had your Althea Gibsons who went to Florida A&M and was a tennis and golf champion, Kurt Flood, who was responsible for the reserve calls and free agency. He was a St. Louis Cardinal baseball player. Tommy Smith, John Carlos, who demonstrated in 1968. Muhammad Ali, Floyd Patterson. The list goes on and on and on in terms of where Colin Kaepernick and how he stood on these particular shoulders. I think the difference now, and when you talk about present time, you got people, like, Steph Curry and LeBron and the Williams sisters and tennis, and they have stood up on these shoulders that I've just mentioned. The interesting piece is that they don't clean the boardroom, now they run the boardroom. There's a little difference in terms of all the people I mentioned and what's going on presently in terms of how these guys and women are, being involved in decisions and business decisions and in regards to supporting business policy.
Let me ask you, Clarence, if you don't mind me stopping you, does that surprise you? Because I'm 51 years old, and it surprises me when I see people from our race reach such high standards. I'm sure you will agree that those levels of success were few and far in between. Bill Cosby comes to mind, Sidney Poitier. Now you see people like LeBron James. You see Miles Davis reach levels of success, money. Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald. These people reach levels of success. I read the autobiography of Miles Davis, and he was talking about one time he had bought a yellow Ferrari in 1972. And he was living in New York City, and he had a gig across all four boroughs he had to cross. He says they stopped a black man driving, an African-American man driving a yellow Ferrari. They stopped him in every borough on the way to his gig. And so it kind of lets you know, yes, this is Miles Davis we're talking about, but yet and still we're talking about 1972. And he says this was daily. So they knew when they saw the car, they knew who it was. Fine. What surprises you the most at how far we've come as a culture? You talk about people, LeBron James, Jay-Z, Barack Obama. How do you feel when you see African-American men conquer such steep mountains?
Well, and when you talk about today's athletes and LeBron James, Tiger Woods, and Chris Paul and Williams sisters, and you also mentioned Kaepernick, but one story is interesting is that Steph Curry, the NBA prolific shooter, is under contract with Under Armour.
Right.
And, the Under Armour president in 2017, I believe, Patrick Frisk, he said some controversial statements supporting his business policy, through Donald Trump, who was president at that time.
Right.
So Steph disagreed with Fisk on the statement and planned to leave the brand.
Mm.
The next day, as you may know, Fisk purchased a full-page ad in the Baltimore newspaper explaining his error in this statement regarding Trump. So I think Curry, he had a $20 million or more contract, Under Armour contract. So to answer your question, that's the difference. Now, these athletes have the money and the business power to actually control, how things are said and what is said. Now, the reality of money, some people say it's no good, some people say it's evil, some people say it's good, but it's how you're going to use it. And, what I've seen, what I've seen in terms of how these current athletes are using their influence and money, and, it's positive. And, obviously I don't know the details, but, hopefully, they continue to, read stuff like the Syracuse 8 and read and stay up, as you are doing, reading different scenarios, historic scenarios with athletic black leaders and athletes, and really get a true understanding of how all this activism was built and where it came from, and they can dictate where it's going.
Right. It's once again amazing. The word that I use every year when I'm blessed to have you on my podcast.
Thank you.
It's amazing to hear and to just hear you recant things that you experience. I like talking to people that have experiences, not that they heard, but that they actually lived through.
Oh, yeah, I'm living black history. Unfortunately, I'm living black history.
Well, fortunately, you are. Fortunately, you have shared with me, and you allow me to share with our listeners, because you are what Black history is all about. And that's why we celebrate you every year, that you will allow us to. I want to talk a little bit about Black history. Before we let you go, we want to... Of course, this is Black History 2022. Take us back to your childhood up until now. How have you seen Black History months and the celebrations change? How have you seen the ancestors and some of the people that you looked up to? Who were some of your inspirations? Talk to us a little bit about your inspirations.
Well, okay, I guess my inspiration, was Jim Brown, of course, the football player and Hollywood actor. And, in my day for young folks, Muhammad Ali was probably one of our, greatest influences great for me. Because Muhammad Ali, everybody had an opportunity to talk with or sit with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali got around to everywhere and everybody. And so people my age, and I'm 72 going on 73, during Muhammad Ali's time in the late 60s, he was very accessible. And he would matter of fact, he fought Joe Frazier in New York, I believe. He came to Oswego College the next day. I think he got beat that day. That was his first loss. And his jaw was swollen. and he was talking, and he held up Sports Illustrated that had the knockdown, and he said, "Look at this." And that was the next day. He said, "Look how fast they put that in there." And he said, "Yeah, I got a swollen jaw," but he said, "Joe Frazier in the hospital."
Sorry, man. Sorry, I'm gonna bust out laughing. I'm sorry, Clarence. Wow,
that's all right.
Incredible,
and
man.
then he told all the black boys, there's about 40 of us in there, to go into this room, the segregated room that was parked, and he came over and just talked to us, man to man about integrity and he was an amazing person. And this was the day after his fight.
Clarence McGill, not to stop you, brother. I'm a huge fan of Muhammad Ali. Can you please repeat on what you said? He said about Joe Frazier. Please, brother.
He said, my jaw was swollen. His jaw was swollen. But he said, but Joe Frazier in the hospital. Joe Frazier right now. He's in the hospital right now.
And he was. He sent him to the hospital, brother.
He said, Joe Frazier in the hospital. So anyway, those are my mentors. And, that's one thing we tried to do when, all the profits from the book that I'm talking about, Leveling the Playing Field, the story of the Syracuse 8, those funds go to talented and skilled freshmen, African American and Latino students that enter the university every year. So I'm trying to pay it forward, just like the Muhammad Ali's and the other great the other athletes, whether they were great or not, that sacrificed a lot. And some of the names we know, and some of the names we don't know.
Right. Well, it's ironic that you say that, because I try to do more research on the times, right? Like we said, the name of the book that you wrote with your 7 other teammates, Leveling the Playing Field, the story of the Syracuse 8. And
there were 9 of us total, though. Syracuse, they picked the Syracuse 8, but the press picked that up, but there were actually 9 of us.
Right. It talks about, just going through your book, just sharing some of the knowledge that comes from the book. It talks about the times, and that Muhammad Ali was protesting. Other students, like you said, were protesting, and it was a time, it sounded like a lot of people were fed up. A lot of young people were fed up. And so it sounded like it was a time, unfortunately, you see things like that when I think of those type of times, people don't normally make a fuss unless they are not treated fairly. And so it sounds like the NCAA, I'm talking about the NCAA all the time, and the big business that it is now, and they are going so far as to allow the students to have what they call a national, an NLI, which instead of the school making money off of Clarence McGill's jersey, you can now profit off of your own jersey sales or your own image. National likeness and image is what it's called. And so even though we've come a long way, you think that they just starting to allow these young men to profit off their own likeness and image in 2021. 2022 is the first year. So these universities have made great sums of money off of the backs of the athletes. Yes, we were blessed, you, myself, many of our friends were blessed to attend these universities, but I'm sure you will agree the amount that was paid for a football scholarship or a scholarship for a young man to go to school, that university or institution made way more money off of that individual than was given. If that makes any sense what I'm saying. And so it's something that I'm learning. The older that I've gotten, I've learned how I was part of that NCAA machine, as they call it, right? It's I won't go as far as to call it a form of slavery, but I actually believe as though there's some element of slavery associated with the NCAA, because the money. It's almost like sharecropping. To me, and if that makes any sense, because that person, you're getting books, tuition, food, housing, but these people are making real money off of your services. So I don't think the rubber is meeting the road. And if that makes any sense to our listeners, of course, you and I understand it because we lived it. But that will be part of our documentary. And I look to shed some light on the disparaging sums of money that are paid out to the student and the amounts that these universities are making off of these young men, right?
Yeah,
and
many universities are being supported through certain athletic programs. Like the University of Alabama, I would assume, pays some money to other colleges in the university, to support them. I would assume that some universities, their programs don't do it. Like, for example, University of Georgia all their money they make may not go to, the school of medicine or the school. It might just stay in the football program. So there's different scenarios for different programs. Syracuse University, they used to spread their money when they were making money amongst the different colleges within the university. So I don't know what they do now because I'm far from it. But I'm interested in regards to your research and what you find out. So,
well, it's and I would love to have you back. Of course, this is something that you and I talk real life. You have been explaining life to me and what I was doing before I even realized what I was doing. And I remember you telling me, "Hey, just keep playing as long as you can. Just keep playing, keep playing."
That's right.
And I didn't understand what I was actually doing. The beautiful part about it is you mentioned your wife, who is a family of mine as well, Evelyn McGill. You guys were living in Washington, D.C. during the time that I attended Georgetown University. And so part of the reason that my mom allowed me to come to Georgetown University was because you guys were living there. And she felt comfortable enough saying, "Hey, well, he at least has family there." And you guys were, I saw you guys attended many games. You guys came to support. You guys would bring me food on campus. And so, as I stated earlier, I would not be sitting here had it not been for you and your wife, Evelyn Vaughn, just helping me through that Washington, D.C. At 18 years old is different.
That's right.
And I'm so glad that I had you guys as part of my team to kind of guide me through a city that you went to school in. So I didn't want to do anything to disappoint my family that I already had in Washington, D.C. And so, believe it or not, it kept me on the straight and narrow just knowing that I had family down on T Street to make sure that I upheld my end of the bargain, an extension of my mom, if you will. And so it's a blessing that we have the resources now to, I'm blessed to have our own media company, TMBT Media Company, on our podcast today to talk about things that happened during your days in college or versus my day in college and what these young men are going through now. The opportunities, I think, and you said it earlier, nothing is worse than a squandered opportunity. And so we have college students and pro students that we help with the pro side of basketball, the college side of basketball. And it's a blessing that you and I have the knowledge. I think there's a difference between having knowledge and sharing it. And I think you being with us today is a huge help as far as sharing knowledge. I think that's our job.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about Black History Month and what it means to you. Talk to me a little bit. We'll close up. I promise not to keep you long, but we did. We are over an hour. But in closing, during Black History Month, Malcolm X assassination, Martin Luther King assassination, how has Black history evolved? Or have we or do you feel as though we have evolved as a people? How do you feel about it? Do you feel as though we've gone back, we've evolved? Just your personal opinion on it.
Well, like I said, I think we progressed, based on some of the things we talked about in terms of those athletes that are setting business policy. But we've also maybe stepped back in a sense, because sometimes I see situations out here all over the country how we sometimes, and I say quote unquote, we hate ourselves.
Yes.
And we are negative toward each other in all types of capacities, which I'm talking about. So it's still a double-edged sword, because just the way America has its systematic racism and the way things are structured. So we just have to fight uphill. Now there is a Black History calendar out. I don't know if I gave it to you, but it's called a Journey into 365 Days of Black History, in which Syracuse 8, we are September, this coming September. And I can give you the website if you want to take a look at this.
Yes, please. Please do. Please share with our listeners as well.
Okay, it's www.iokts.com. So again, I'll repeat it. It's www.I as in Ichabod, O as in Otto, K as in kitten, T as in Tom, S as in Sam.com. www.iokts.com. And you will see a fabulous Black History calendar, which deals with the individuals that are featured, and they have contributed their brilliance to enhance the human experience across a wide range of disciplines. And it says including medicine, science, law, journalism, education, sports, and activism. He said these trailblazers' accomplishments inspire, inform, and hearten us and hearten us all, from abolitionist statesmen and orator Frederick Douglass to educator, college presidents, civil rights activists, etc. So they have brief biographies, accompanies the images that each figure, birthday, or notable person is presented with during that particular month. And it's really a Black History, milestone, I think, in terms of each day of the year. They give you some information. So, take a gander at that if you can, the 2022 calendar on that website.
Right. Well, I'll be putting up the link to your book. I'll also be putting up the link to your calendar on our website and on our social media, so that those listeners that I'm sure would love to tune in and to do some more research on who you are and the things that you've done to contribute to our culture and our race, brother. I'm here to tell you that, of course, you've been hearing this from me a long time. I just appreciate who you are and who you have always been. I've always known you to be the same person since I was 18 years old. Of course, your wife also is family, but you didn't have to be solid as you are, right? You didn't have to be, just because she's my family didn't mean you had to be. And so I appreciate you guiding a young man trying to find his way, young African-American man trying to find his way in the world. And I remember you telling me, just like it was yesterday, just keep going, man. Keep playing as long as you can, because one day you're not going to be able to play.
Fill your pockets.
Fill your pockets is what you used to tell me. Between yourself and my Uncle Elmo used to tell me, play as long as you can, because
that's right.
I'm at 51 years old. You're not going to be able to play, Jack. So you might as well do it while you can. And so I'm just so appreciative of who you have been to me and my family. And it's a blessing, and I'm honored to have you on my show, on my podcast. to have you today, to give you your flowers, brother, to tell you that you are appreciated. You mean the world to me personally, but you know my group of people, Dennis Parker, Lawrence Walden, Derek Tompkins, you mean the world to us. So
yes. The boys,
the fellas, Junior Burroughs, those guys.
Oh boy.
You know, so I'm glad that we have some fresh material for them. They can listen in and continue to learn as I have. So today, we're going to shut down part 1 of our podcast today with Clarence McGill on our TMBT Media podcast. During Black History Month, of course, the month ends on the 28th, but we celebrate during the whole year. Kind of like you said, I'm dealing with your calendar. We don't celebrate just 30 days or 28 days. Every day is Black History Month, especially for us. We own our own channel and can say whatever it is we want and invite the legends that we want to have on here. So I'm blessed. I want to thank you, Clarence McGill, for having me, man. Thank you. Hey, any parting words that you want to leave with our listeners before we shut it down?
I just want to let them know that how you developed as a young man to be a fine adult and having, many insights that, folks normally may not have. And so you appreciate it and continue the good work that you're doing now. And just anything I can do to help you, just let me know.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Of course, I wouldn't be here at 51 years old if it wasn't for you and your wife. So I'm going to continue to, no need, and as the young people say, don't fix it if it ain't broke. So I'm just going to continue listening to the people that have got me this far. Hopefully you will join us again for part 2 to continue to share some of your wisdom with us and our listeners. And today we won't hold you any longer. Today, Monday, February 28th, 2022, part 1 of our podcast with Clarence McGill, Syracuse football legend, Howard University master's degree of 1975, author. We're celebrating Clarence McGill during our Black History Month today, and want to thank you. Please stay tuned for more. We will be putting our links up to Clarence's book, some more articles from him. We'll have him doing some more blogs and writing some more blogs and vlogs for us. So we'll be signing off tonight. Thanks everyone for listening. All right.
Thank you, man. Okay.